I moved to Willow Creek for a fresh start. Being the only black person wasn't new to me, but the way they stared was. Then came the strange symbols on my door, the whispers, the footsteps at night. That's when I realized they weren't just watching me, they were hunting me. What I'm about to share isn't just a story, it's a warning. This town has a tradition, one they've kept hidden for generations. If you're feeling brave enough to hear what happened to me, keep watching. But know this, once you learn the truth about Willow Creek, you'll never look at small towns the same way again. Hit subscribe now because this is just the beginning of what I've uncovered. I never wanted to come to Willow Creek, but when Grandma Rose died and left me her house, it felt like fate stepping in when I needed it most. My life in the city had fallen apart. Bad breakup, lost job, mounting debt. This inheritance seemed like a lifeline. If only I'd known what was waiting for me. The drive into town was beautiful, I'll give it that. Rolling hills, forest-lined roads, that crisp autumn air that smells like possibilities. The house itself was everything I remembered from childhood summers. Weathered blue clapboard, wide porch with a swing, garden overgrown but salvageable. For a moment, standing on that porch with the key in my hand, I felt hope. That feeling didn't last long. My first trip to the local grocery store changed everything. The conversations that stopped when I walked in, the stares that followed me down every aisle, the cashier who wouldn't meet my eyes but somehow never looked away. Being the only black person in a space wasn't new to me. I grew up in predominantly white schools. But this was different. This wasn't curiosity or ignorance. It felt calculated. Only Sarah, my next-door neighbor, seemed normal. She brought over a homemade pie the day after I arrived, insisted I call if I needed anything. "Folks here take time to warm up to newcomers," she said, but something in her smile didn't reach her eyes. Still, I was grateful for any friendly face. Then the strange things started happening. Small at first, mail that disappeared from my box, footprints in the soft earth beneath my bedroom window, the distinct feeling of being watched while I gardened or read on the porch. At night, I'd hear whispers outside, too faint to make out words but too deliberate to be the wind. I found the box in Grandma's attic while looking for winter blankets. Newspaper clippings, dozens of them, dating back to the 1920s, all about town traditions and community cleansings and selection ceremonies. Photos of town gatherings with people in strange masks, and notes in my grandmother's handwriting. "It's happening again," and "they've chosen." One night, I woke to the sound of scratching at my door. Not animal claws, but something worse, deliberate, human. When I checked the next morning, a symbol was carved into the wood, a circle with a strange pattern inside that made my stomach turn. That's when I knew I wasn't just unwelcome in Willow Creek. I was being hunted. What would you do if your own home became a trap? If the place that should be your sanctuary became the center of a nightmare? Subscribe now because my story of survival is just beginning, and what I discovered in this town might save your life someday. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head. Small towns, suspicious of outsiders. That's normal, right? But what happened next shattered any hope of this being ordinary small-town xenophobia. I woke one morning to find my front door defaced with blood-red symbols, circles within circles, strange angular marks that reminded me of the patterns in Grandma's clippings. The paint was still wet, dripping down the wood like tears. Someone had stood there just hours before, marking my home while I slept inside. The message was clear. I was being tagged, labeled, identified. That same day, I found a note tucked into my mailbox. No envelope, no stamp. Just a piece of yellowed paper with 7 words that made my blood freeze. "Leave before the harvest moon. Final warning." The harvest moon, just 10 days away according to my quick internet search. The countdown had begun. I called Sarah immediately. She arrived within minutes, her face pale when she saw the door. "This isn't right," she whispered, looking nervously over her shoulder. "Listen, there are things about this town, history that doesn't make it into the official records." She wouldn't elaborate, just squeezed my hand and said, "Be careful who you trust. Even me." Then she helped me scrub the symbols away, her hands trembling the entire time. That night I packed my bags. Whatever was happening, I wasn't sticking around to find out. I threw everything important into my car and turned the key. only to hear the sickening sound of an engine that wouldn't start. When I popped the hood, the damage was obvious even to me. Someone had methodically destroyed my engine, cutting hoses, removing essential parts. This wasn't vandalism. This was imprisonment. Desperate, I returned to Grandma's papers, searching for answers. Buried beneath the clippings, I found her personal journal. The entries started normally enough. Gardening notes, recipes, complaints about arthritis. Then 3 years ago, they changed. They've begun preparations earlier this year, she wrote. The selection committee meets tomorrow. God help whoever they choose. And later, I can't stand by again. Not this time. I found a way to stop it, but they're watching me now. The final entry chilled me to the bone. If you're reading this, I failed. The hunt is coming. Learn what I learned. Finish what I started. She knew. Somehow, she knew her journal would fall into my hands. When I took my concerns to Sheriff Benson the next day, his smile never reached his cold eyes. Miss, small towns have traditions outsiders don't always understand. Your grandmother understood that. Eventually. He leaned across his desk, voice dropping. Folks who adapt get along just fine here. Others, well, he straightened my grandmother's photo on his wall with deliberate slowness. Willow Creek has ways of correcting problems. I left his office knowing two things with absolute certainty. My grandmother hadn't died of natural causes as I'd been told, and unless I uncovered what she knew, I would be next. The hunt the town was preparing wasn't metaphorical, and I was the prey. With my car sabotaged and the sheriff clearly involved, I knew I had to act fast. My grandmother's journal mentioned town hall records, documents she'd accessed before her death. Whatever secrets Willow Creek was hiding, the answers were locked away in their archives. I couldn't walk in during business hours. Too many eyes watched my every move. I'd have to break in. The old building sat dark and empty after midnight. Years of urban living had taught me a thing or two about locked doors, and the town hall's ancient windows were laughably easy to jimmy open. Inside, the air hung heavy with dust and secrets, the silence broken only by the occasional creak of settling wood. The archives were in the basement, just like Grandma had described, rows of metal filing cabinets and shelves of leather-bound record books stretching back centuries. I worked by flashlight, heart pounding with every distant sound. Hours passed as I sifted through mundane tax records and council minutes. Then I found it, a locked cabinet labeled simply Traditions. The key from Grandma's journal, the one I'd thought was for her garden shed, slid into the lock perfectly. She'd planned this, left me breadcrumbs to follow. What I discovered inside made me physically ill. Detailed records of the cleansing, a ritual dating back to the town's founding in 1672. Every 50 years, Willow Creek selected an outsider for sacrifice. The documents spoke of purification through blood and renewal through selection. Clinical accounts described how the chosen one would be hunted through the forest on the night of the harvest moon, their capture and death ensuring another half-century of prosperity. More horrifying were the photographs, decades of victims. A Chinese railroad worker in 1874, an Italian immigrant in 1924, a Mexican farmhand in 1974. Each one had been lured to town, isolated, then hunted like an animal. And every picture showed the same circle of townsfolk wearing wooden masks, standing over their prey, standing where they now wanted me to lie. My hands shook as I photographed everything with my phone. Dawn was approaching when I slipped out, evidence secured. I was halfway home when Sarah stepped out from between two buildings. My heart nearly stopped until she whispered, "Not here. They're watching." She led me through a series of backyards to a storm cellar behind an abandoned house. Underground, I met three others, an elderly man, a middle-aged woman, and a teenage boy. "We're what's left of your grandmother's group," Sarah explained. "Rose was trying to end the tradition. She discovered something about the ritual, a way to break it without bloodshed." The old man nodded sadly. "They found out, made her death look natural. The town believes the sacrifice brings prosperity," the woman added. "Drought, disease, economic hardship, all held at bay by the hunt. Most folks don't question it, just accept the bargain their ancestors made." "Your grandmother was close to breaking the cycle," Sarah said. She translated the original ritual text and found a loophole. That's why they chose you, her bloodline. They think it makes the sacrifice more powerful. The teenage boy spoke up, his voice cracking. The hunt starts on the harvest moon, 3 days from now. You need to finish what your grandmother started. Walking back to my house at dawn, a terrible clarity settled over me. The whispers grew louder as I passed. Townspeople gathering in small groups, watching. They weren't hiding anymore. The countdown had begun, and I had 3 days to decode my grandmother's research, or become the latest portrait in their twisted gallery of victims. Those 3 days passed in a blur of frantic research and mounting dread. I barely slept, poring over my grandmother's notes, trying to piece together her discovery. The resistance members brought me supplies and information, but they were being watched too closely to stay long. As the harvest moon approached, the town's atmosphere shifted, an eager tension hanging in the air, like the metallic scent before a storm. On the final night, I stood at my grandmother's kitchen window, watching the full moon rise, orange and swollen above the tree line. Beautiful and terrible. In the distance, I could hear them gathering, car doors slamming, voices calling out in excitement. This was a celebration for them, a tradition. My death wrapped up in ritual and justified by superstition. I'd prepared as best I could. Dressed in dark clothes, backpack filled with essentials, water, food, my grandmother's journal, and the materials for the counter-ritual Sarah had helped me understand. My plan was simple. Reach the sacred grove my grandmother had mapped, perform the ritual that would break the cycle, then escape through the tunnel system she discovered beneath her property. I slipped out the back door just as the first torches appeared at the edge of my property. The sight froze my blood. At least 30 townsfolk in long robes, wooden masks carved with ancient symbols covering their faces. At their head stood Sheriff Benson, his mask painted with intricate red designs that seemed to glow in the torchlight. "The selection is confirmed," he called out, voice distorted by his mask. "The hunt begins when the moon reaches its zenith. Let the cleansing commence." I didn't wait to hear more, fleeing into the dense woods behind the house. My grandmother's detailed maps guided me through the darkness, helping me avoid the main paths where hunters would surely be stationed. The forest seemed alive around me, branches reaching like fingers, roots rising to trip my desperate steps. Whether this was supernatural or just fear playing tricks, I couldn't tell. An hour into my flight, I heard the hunting horn, a deep, resonant sound that echoed through the trees. The hunt had officially begun. Soon after, I heard the dogs, their baying cutting through the night like knives. They'd prepared for this, trained for it. This wasn't their first hunt. I pushed deeper into the forest, following landmarks from my grandmother's maps. A lightning-struck tree, a stone formation like a crouching bear, a creek that flowed uphill during the harvest moon. This last sight confirmed what I'd suspected. The forest itself was somehow altered during the ritual, reality bending around the hunt. Near a small waterfall, I stopped to catch my breath. That's when I heard her voice. "Maya? Are you there?" Sarah called softly from the darkness. I got separated from the others. "The ritual items, did you bring them?" Relief flooded through me. I wasn't alone. "Sarah, over here," I whispered, stepping towards her voice. The blow caught me across the back of my shoulders, sending me sprawling into the dirt. I rolled over to see Sarah standing over me, a wooden club in her hand and no mask to hide her face, only an expression of genuine regret. "I'm so sorry," she said, reaching for a rope at her belt. "But my family has led the selection committee for generations. Your grandmother almost ruined everything, and we can't let her blood finish what she started." She gestured, and other robed figures emerged from the trees. "The prosperity of Willow Creek depends on this sacrifice. Surely you understand. The needs of many outweigh the one." As they closed in, my hand found a rock. One desperate swing bought me seconds to escape, crashing through the underbrush as Sarah's voice called after me. "It only makes the hunt more meaningful when you fight. Run, Maya! Give us a proper cleansing!" Betrayed and injured, I fled deeper into the forest than I'd planned. The sacred grove seemed impossible to reach now. Then as I stumbled through a dense thicket, the ground gave way beneath me. I was falling, sliding down an earthen tunnel into absolute darkness. My grandmother's underground passage system. I'd found it by accident. In the pitch black, I fumbled for my flashlight. The beam revealed a network of hand-dug tunnels stretching in multiple directions. Scratched into the wall was a familiar symbol from my grandmother's journal, a marker pointing the way. Above me, I could hear the hunters' footsteps and frantic calls. They hadn't seen where I disappeared. Following the tunnel markers, I emerged into a small underground chamber. There, carved into the earthen walls, were the same symbols from my door, from the masks, from the ancient texts, but arranged differently. And in the center stood a stone altar, its surface stained dark with the evidence of previous cleansings. This was it, the true heart of Willow Creek's ritual. Not the grove above, but this hidden place where the real power was channeled. My grandmother had discovered what the town elders kept secret even from their own people. And waiting for me on that altar was a wooden box with my name carved into its surface. With trembling hands, I opened the wooden box bearing my name. Inside lay my grandmother's final message, a leather-bound journal I'd somehow missed in my search, its pages filled with her discoveries about Willow Creek's darkest secret. The truth was far worse than I'd imagined. The town wasn't just killing outsiders for some superstitious tradition. In 1672, the original settlers had made a pact with something ancient that lived beneath the forest, something that had been worshipped by indigenous people long before white settlers arrived. The entity offered protection and prosperity in exchange for blood sacrifice every 50 years. The ritual wasn't symbolic, it was feeding something. My grandmother's meticulous research had uncovered the original pact's wording and its loophole. The entity required blood from one who does not belong, but the definition of belonging was specific, one with no ties to the land itself. My grandmother realized that her bloodline, our bloodline, had a connection to this land that predated the town. Her own grandmother had been indigenous to this region, a fact she'd hidden her entire life. This blood connection meant I could perform the counter ritual. I could offer a different covenant, not severing the bond with the entity, but transforming it. The prosperity would remain, but without the sacrifice. My blood freely given, not taken, would seal this new pact. Above me, I could hear the hunting party getting closer, their footsteps and voices echoing through the tunnels they clearly knew existed. I had minutes at most. Working quickly, I arranged the ritual items according to my grandmother's instructions, herbs she'd grown in her garden, symbols drawn in charcoal, and finally a small cut across my palm. As my blood touched the altar stone, the air in the chamber changed, pressure building until my ears popped. The walls themselves seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. A deep rumbling shook the chamber as voices shouted from the tunnel entrance. The town's leader emerged first, not Sheriff Benson as I'd expected, but the mayor, a woman I'd barely glimpsed during my time in Willow Creek. "Stop!" she commanded, her mask pushed up to reveal a face contorted with fear. "You have no idea what you're doing." Behind her, other robed figures crowded the tunnel entrance, including Sarah and the sheriff. "I know exactly what I'm doing," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "Ending a cycle of murder that's fed this town for centuries?" "You'll destroy us all," the mayor shouted over the growing rumble. "The entity requires the hunt, the fear, the unwilling sacrifice. Your grandmother's theory is wrong. This will unleash it, not transform it." But it was too late. The blood I'd freely given had already been accepted. The chamber's shaking intensified, dirt raining from the ceiling. A sound like 1,000 voices laughing filled the space, driving the hunting party to their knees, hands clapped over ears. "What have you done?" Sarah screamed as cracks appeared in the chamber walls, dark liquid seeping through. Not water, but something that moved with purpose. I didn't answer, instead bolting for the tunnel my grandmother had marked as the escape route, one the town hunters didn't know existed. Behind me, chaos erupted as the entity made its presence known. Not angry as they'd feared, but amused by the new arrangement. Prosperity would continue in Willow Creek, but the price had changed. What that price would be, I didn't want to know. I followed the hidden tunnel for what felt like miles, eventually emerging from a storm drain at the edge of town just as dawn broke. Behind me, Willow Creek was in turmoil, sirens wailing, people running through streets, a strange mist settling over the town center. I didn't look back as I walked to the bus station in the next town over, carrying only my backpack and my grandmother's journals. It was on that bus heading anywhere but Willow Creek that I discovered her final notes, a map marking towns across America with the same symbol that had been on my door. Places where similar pacts had been made, where other hunts took place on different celestial cycles. Willow Creek wasn't unique. It was part of a network, a web of dark bargains stretching across the country. And my grandmother hadn't just been trying to save me or her town, she'd been working to break the entire system. Now that work was mine. The entity beneath Willow Creek was just one of many, and I had the knowledge to confront them all. My grandmother's blood had given me both the connection to the land and the responsibility to protect it from the true monsters. Not the supernatural entities, but the humans who would sacrifice others for their own prosperity. I still travel between these marked towns, documenting their rituals, identifying their victims before they're chosen, breaking their cycles one by one. And I'm not alone. Others like me have joined this fight, descendants of past sacrifices who carry their own blood connections to the land. So now you know my story, how I went from being the only black girl in a small town to breaking an ancient covenant and exposing a nationwide network of ritual sacrifice. But this isn't just about me or Willow Creek. These hunts are still happening, hidden behind small-town charm and tradition. Look around your own community. Notice the outsiders who disappear. Question the prosperity that seems to have no source. And if you see the symbols I've shown you, contact me immediately, because the monsters aren't always in the shadows. Sometimes they're running the town council. Sometimes they're your friendly neighbors. And sometimes they're hunting for someone just like you. I survived their hunt, but others might not be so lucky. This isn't just my story. It's happening in towns across the country, hidden behind smiles and traditions. Follow my channel as I expose these rituals and help others escape. Share this video to spread awareness. Remember, the monsters aren't always in the shadows. Sometimes they're running the town council. Subscribe now and join the resistance.